there are very few who are in denial. Everyone knows that the governments and major banks ship in the majority of narcotics and even grow and produce them. They own the aircraft, they ship the arms in. It's all come out in the news over and over again. The coca plants, the poppies, all of it. And they keep drugs illegal so that the price will be higher, so people will have to rob your house or rob your wife or rob you to pay it, and that money goes back to the banks. Then, when they catch the low-level zombies who are on their product, they then put them in large private prisons owned by the big money laundering banks to then work for 25 cents an hour, driving down wages and displacing your jobs. And the good old boys cheer it. And they say, I work at the prison. I work at the Justice Center. And then their own son's in there, and they're proud of it. My boy's in prison now. I'm over him, but that's a good thing. That's America. He got caught with some of them drugs. Because the only job was dealing drugs or running the prison. And that's the predatory New World Order economy. Vicente Fox, who's a globalist, though, is probably pretty sad that his ranch is overrun down in Mexico and that the criminal government down there is going to lose control. See, they've lost the war with smaller cartels who are, the people are so poor, they're ready to die. They're not afraid to die. Pretty macho down in Mexico. I mean, it's more people dying every year than died in a year, times 3 times at least. 3 times the people die every year or more in Mexico in the fake drug war than died on the U.S. side in the Vietnam War every year. It's 40-something thousand the last 3 years. 58,000 died in over a decade of Vietnam, so do the math. And so now they're like, ceasefire, ceasefire. Let's decriminalize this stuff. And at the Summit of Americas, with all the hookers and the rest of it, with all of this going on, the news with the Latin American leaders was decriminalize. Stop it. They know Europe and some areas has done this. Crime rates drop massively. People then see drugs as a sad disease, not as sexy, associated with money. But see, the system has a 2-prong attack. Yet now over 20% of the population of women or higher, men close to that, school children over 20%, on psychotropic brain-damaging drugs. And when they go haywire and kill people, they just then call for taking our guns. And then also push the illegal drugs on them. And the, quote, U.S. government, that means the big banks that run our government, that launder the money and control the Federal Reserve, they said, no, we're not getting rid of it. In fact, we're going to keep shipping guns into Mexico and Honduras to keep destabilizing things. We like it. We like it just fine. Because the war on drugs is a success. Corrupt the police, imprison the population, bring in drugs, kill the people with ODs, destroy society, have SWAT teams busting houses, kill people's dogs, kill insurance salesmen's wrong house, corrupt the police. You think prohibition, 10 years of alcohol prohibition, tripling the size of the mafia, corrupting police, hundreds and hundreds of millions made in those days' numbers a year. You think that was a success, prohibition for the mafia? Or was it a failure? Oh, no, don't make alcohol illegal. That you just made it criminals' domain. The government, the feds deal with child molestation rules and kidnapping rules because they publicly run most of the child kidnapping. They'll make a big deal out of some lone scumbag, but when they're loading little kids on C-130s to be flown to Saudi Arabia to have their heads beat in with claw hammers and snuff film with shotgun blast to the head, you know what? It comes out, Italian news reports it, German news reports it, they fire the people that report it. Not because they were wrong, but because U.S. government officials are involved. You got people that like to beat little kids' heads in with hammers after they rape them. That's who runs the world. Okay? And go look at what I just said, by the way. You're going to be like, that's a true story? Oh, yeah. Would you like to hear more? It's kind of like Starship Troopers on the news. Would you like to hear more? We take you now to Clandathu. We take you now to the planet Earth, where the crazy people run things. The New World Order is insane. And I want to bring this up to top researcher. He's a great researcher, Alan Watt, musician, author, radio host in his own right, cuttingthematrix.com. I want to get him on with us and out of the gates hear what he has to say today Maybe hold him a little bit in the next hour and take some calls. But I wanted to get Alan on today to bring up this point because I have a theory, but it's not really a theory. It's kind of like I have a theory that crawdads come up to the edge of the water and hunt little frogs and things. Little crawdads, little freshwater lobsters, little freshwater crustaceans. It's not a theory. I watch them do it. I don't have a theory that ducks fly south in the winter and back north in the spring. I know it. And I've studied elites. It's like a tropism. In every case, going back to the beginnings of civilization, every culture built pyramids and sacrificed children on top of them every day. Every culture ate children. Every culture tortured people. What is that? That's what cultures always end in. Because psychopath, inbred, crazy people keep inbreeding. They're the ones that are like cancer. They're willing to do whatever to have power. They lust after it. And then something happens. They interbreed, which in every mammal species causes crazy behavior, antisocial behavior, megalomania, aggression, a sense of psycho-domination, masochistic bloodlust, bloodthirst. Every culture, study history. But then something worse happens. Syphilis has been with humans as long as we've been on this planet. Syphilis basically is microscopic worms that eat your brain. And almost all elites that have been studied had syphilitic brains. Pharaohs, mafia dons, British royalty. Jack the Ripper, the crown prince, running around killing people. So you've got syphilitic brains interbreeding with aggressive dominant people, creating hyper-psychopathic, blood-drinking goblin creatures, basically. That's what the New World Order is. That's why they do this. Why does a spider spin a certain web? Why does a squirrel bury nuts? It's inbred into them. Normal, wholesome people are blind to this because it's so alien. If we can ever admit and discover this historically, we wouldn't be doomed to repeat it. All right, I take you now to Canada, and Alan Watt joining us. Alan, what do you think of my statements, and what do you think of the point I made with the inbreeding and the syphilitic brain overlay?
Oh, it's pretty accurate. I mean, even Lenin, they found out the left part of his brain was pretty well eaten away when he died. And of course, it was insane, basically, for the last few months. So it's a very common thing, but it really turns up in the second and third generation of elite where they might all start off as gangsters or robbers or murderers, probably all of them, in fact. And in the third generation, who get the education, come along, and they start to form their clubs. And then they discuss the normal topics, like why are we so different from all the peasants that we rule over? And they come up with their own theories. And what they came up with, of course, is there's always been slavery. It's a natural thing. Slavery is a natural thing. And the peasants are always in a different mindset than we are, because we're the leisure class. And we have time to think about things, but the peasant doesn't. And then, of course, the fourth generation comes along, and then they say, well, the peasant actually can't think about that. He's actually inferior. He's low IQ. And this goes on for many, many generations, and until you hit the present time. Today, you're ruled by the same descendants that have been here for an awful long time.
And again, if you study the royalty, the Rothschilds, all of them, generally half the offspring are locked up in asylums. That's the half that survived. Generally, about half die, and then of the half that live, half are criminally insane, literally acting like monkeys, and then the other half are just psychopathic control freaks.
The control freaks, but you must remember, too, these characters, like the Rothschilds, belong to their own secret societies, and they have them. And Benjamin Franklin, in fact, joined a couple of them, in fact.
Hellfire Club, yeah.
Yeah, and one in France, too, the Nine Sisters Lodge. And he lived the same kind of lifestyle as he did over in France. When you see how much he was given per month by the French government and the mansion they put him up in, and the parties, he had endless parties and all the top women of the day, etc. He actually enjoyed that lifestyle. But the thing is, corruption has always ruled the world. Charles Galton Darwin said the same thing, and he was another inbred descended from Charles Darwin, related to the Huxleys. Of course, all the top names are all related together. And he said there's always been slavery in one form or another. And of course, democracy is another form of it, just a disguised slavery, and with income taxes, etc., and property taxes. And he says, we are in the process of creating a more efficient form of slavery. That was in the 1950s. Well, you were seeing the birth pangs as they go through, all training the public to be terrified, because they used the Soviet system as well, by the way. And we were supposed to be under the threat of power being used against us. It works very effectively, as I say. It worked terribly well in the Soviet Union. And the kill method here isn't taking you at the moment into the streets and shooting you. The kill method is, of course, as you mentioned earlier, is to do with giving you cancers and various diseases that you're never fully 100% fit. Nobody today is. You can't be, with inoculations and the poisoned foods, etc. The elites don't get those injections. They don't eat the food.
And by the way, they brag about how they do it, but when you tell the general public about this, they're like, oh, that's scary. I just decide that isn't true. And the elites say, see, we openly admit we're killing them, and they don't care. And the mothers are like, that's right, I'm taking my kid in to give him a cancer shot right now. And then the mother will get attention when their kid dies a horrible death of cancer. And that, at the end of the day, is really what matters. It's like, gee, can my kid get cancer so I can buy him the cancer Barbie? That's what they really want. Alan Watt is our guest. We'll open the phones up for those that are holding. You can talk about any issue. But we're discussing total control freaks who enjoy hurting the natural order. They want to be God. They're trying to overthrow the natural creation. Ugliness is beautiful to them. Alan, you were getting into their admissions. And what's incredible is we've posted all these documents. You've covered it. They admit they're putting cancer viruses in the vaccines. We have videos of the inventors of some of the biggest vaccines joking about killing hundreds of millions and laughing on PBS. And you talk to trendies, and they go, well, there are too many people. And I'm like, listen, you maggot, you're being injected too. The GMO's for you. And they're like, whatever. It's like they think if they decide they've joined it, it's like they're on the team, even though they're being destroyed by it. And that's part of the mind control. Alan Watt, continue.
Yeah, that's all part of the education. In fact, to get at school in social sciences, there's many names for it, but it's really a new indoctrination into the value of life. What is the value of life? Are we more important than those guys over in Sub-Sahara or wherever? And they've already indoctrinated a whole bunch into that death is good. Orwell mentioned this too, not Orwell, but Huxley in Brave New World, where the children are brought round to dying, and it's a big party time. And now, of course, we're getting into euthanasia now. They've already been prepared for it. A whole generation is prepared that death is all right, and we should just celebrate it. And from then it goes on to, well, why don't we just kill them off earlier? There's too many people, or the pensioners will take all the money. It's going to cost a fortune to keep them going. Why not just use the money for us? And this is all happening right now as we speak, and no one really understands how it's all connected. We live through a plan. Everything from government is still the same part, the same of the long-term agenda. Depopulation, a Sovietized world, technically that's what it is. It's a Sovietized world, where, as I say, where right now they haven't bludgeoned everybody to death that they don't like. They're simply doing the soft kill and bringing down the populations globally. And whenever these third world countries sign on to the United Nations and the baubles they give them, the baubles are awfully good. We've had it used on ourselves at one time, a long time ago. And they take the bubbles and then they take the injections from the World Health Organization, and immediately they've got fertility problems. And they have very early cancer onsets, and especially in women too. It disrupts their whole hormonal system. Males as well turn into females almost. And that's the bisphenols, the estrogens. They've known about the bisphenols since the late 1800s when they first discovered them. They knew what it did to the public then. And they waited till the 1950s to put it into the plastic bottles, plastic pipes, everything's plastic, and only you're getting a good daily dose of it wherever you happen to be. So you're under full-scale attack. And you've got to understand, this is not a happenstance thing from one president or prime minister to the other. That there's not a difference between any president or prime minister. They've all belonged to the same organization worldwide since the late 1800s. And that's what Carl Quigley talked about in his book, Tragedy and Hope. So it's hard for most folk to think that can continue, But it does. You can understand how long the Soviet system lasted. Look, it took 100 years to plan the takeover by the Bolsheviks, 100 years before even the first revolution in Russia. These guys are long-term planners because the world is their goal, and they work intergenerationally. They employ and train intergenerationally. And now, of course, with the school systems being pretty well universal, same curriculum, they're all indoctrinated from school. The education has plummeted since the 50s, and definitely the 60s. It really went on a rampage then. And the children are simply indoctrinated into socialism and groupthink. And especially in the U.S., individuality is pretty well eradicated. It's a nasty thing to be an individual, and the United Nations itself has said their main enemy to their whole agenda is individualism. It must be destroyed. So we are living through a plan. We've got taxes that are crippling the public. Never mind all the taxes on food. But they're putting a tax here in Canada across all the food stuffs as well now, a value-added tax, or GST, HST, doesn't matter what they call it, it's all a value-added tax. And we must go into value-added taxes because when you're signing all the free trade agreements, then you're allowing to imports from all those countries which are tax-exempt at the import customs. Therefore, they don't want to lose that money. They simply put what they're losing onto you and make it up that way through your taxes. That's why they had to bring in value-added taxes for all free trade countries. The U.S. is told to get really hit by that in any significant way.
All right, stay there, Alan. But what you're saying here is empires don't die, they just reinvent themselves. And this is a secretive, parasite, Illuminati cult that's much older than the Illuminati. That's just one of the more modern names that understands how to control humans, that has advanced technologies, and who basically preys on humanity as a predator class, which was put into an allegorical form of the Morlocks and the Eloys by... Ladies and gentlemen, we are here Monday through Friday, 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. Central, 12 noon to 3 p.m. Eastern. Blasting out on XM channel 166. Blasting out on over 100 AM and FM stations. Blasting out on WWCR 100,000-watt global shortwave. And #1 on all the major metrics from Alexa to Shoutcast on audio streams and podcast. One of the #1 in talk radio on iTunes. Now #1 on Roku, everything. Streaming video, prisonplanet.tv. And, you know, I get really fired up. Their conditioning didn't work on me. I read hundreds of government documents and republish them where they admit they're putting cancer viruses in the vaccines, the GMOs designed to sterilize us, the elites all have their own private farms, are obsessed with it, Wall Street Journal, LA Times, won't eat GMO, the Monsanto cafeterias at their elite facilities with their scientists. Since 1999, they had a rebellion and will not eat GMO. This is the genetic engineers. That's Associated Press. The Germans, the memos came out a few years ago, said don't take vaccines. And if you want them, we have a, quote, clean vaccine. That's real. I take it personal. I get upset. Last week, we worked real late. We were up here at 9 at night. And I said, guys, you've really kicked some rump. We've reached millions of extra people thanks to your work. Let me take you out to a Brazilian steakhouse. We get there about 9:30, and there is a child obviously damaged. And I go out on the street afterwards and see people with another child that's got neurological problems. And I started crying, and I mean sobbing, in front of the guys. And they'd never seen anything like it. A few times on air, I've kind of thought about something, bring up the image, because it gets to me. This is a soft kill, covert Holocaust against humanity. The West is dying. 1.3 children for every 2 adults. We're dying. It's painful. I'm not just some selfish idiot that wants to go, whatever, I'm going to drink beer and watch a football game. I love beauty. I love poetry. I love humanity. I love creativity. I love the innocence of my children, and I want them to have a future. And I think about how we're in the grasp of highly intelligent, inbred super psychos who base their culture on syphilitic hallucinations. We're living in the creation of hallucinating syphilitics. I mean, that's it. This is planet syphilis brain. And Hitler, it turned out, had syphilis. All of them. Stalin, Lenin, all of them, rotten brains. I mean, I now understand it. We are living in the wonderland of syphilitic crazy people. And again, even though they've cured syphilis, or the treatments for it by the 40s, the point is the whole culture is set by that. Inbreeding, syphilis. This is what democide is. This is why leaders throughout history, right when they have total control, just say, black uniforms, mass murder, burn cities, death, blah. That's what somebody with syphilitic brain rot will just go out and start stabbing people. Well, you give people, because again, the elites are having sex with 20, 30 women, men a day. Nero. Every time I say this, people don't believe it. You can look it up in the history. Nero, they would have these big day-long parties on holidays that they had basically every week. And his favorite thing to do with all the Roman elite in his palace is he would dress up like a werewolf, they'd chain up a child, and he'd run up. You got to read deeper to the histories because the main llamas don't like to put this in there, but he'd rape a child in public and then bite their throats out, ripping their arteries out, spraying blood all over him, dressed up in a wolf's outfit. What, Caligula after him married his horse. You don't get the full story on that. He was married to it. He made it the consulate, the head of Rome, the head of the Roman Senate. He would have the high priest. You read tea leaves, or they throw bones on the ground, or they cut a bull open and read their liver. Well, he would have the high priest, and that was one of the last straws for him, read its excrement. They all announce themselves God, and that's what Ray Kurzweil and all of them are doing. Oh, we're God, we're merging with the computers, release the GMO, whatever happens is natural because we did it and it's a mutation. They're going to destroy the planet. Okay? They're crazy. If Nero wants to marry his horse and rip children's throats out 2,000 years ago or whatever, or 1,800 years ago or whatever, that's bad enough. They got nuclear weapons. They've got antimatter weapons. They've got biological weapons. And they're going to kill everybody, including they're building giant underground bases, huge redoubts, seed vaults, total insanity. And everybody that works for these people better start sabotaging them however you can to resist them. And I don't mean physically. I mean, you just better start resisting however you can, or there's no future. Alan Watt, can you feel the sense of immediacy? You've got the floor. What do you say about what I just broke down? What's the latest on Alan Watt, cuttingthematrix.com's radar screen?
Well, they're definitely ready for a big cull. I mean a physical cull as well. You look at the nonsense with the Olympic Games in London. You've got a warship in the Thames. You've got guided missile systems. They're now putting snipers and helicopters to go over the crowds, army snipers. I mean, this is supposed to be a peacetime country, and everyone is literally living inside a prison camp. This is the sort of thing you expect in a prison camp. I mean, a real, futuristic prison camp. This is not life for the general public, but the training is they're using these big games, etc., to get us all trained either through attending the things yourselves or watching on television. That this is the new system. Be very afraid of the new system because they've got a lot of really nasty stuff to implement socially still yet. And they're training the people step by step through fear. And to be honest with you, I don't see any peaceable way out of this because, remember, Quigley said that these guys have been running all the countries in the West since the late 1800s with this particular agenda. I cannot see them giving up because we ask them nicely. I can't see them giving up if you even try to run your own guys in there into the offices of the presidency. I can't see it happening. It's never happened in 100 years. It's always their boy gets in. And so you're living through an agenda, as I say, but at the top of the tree, above even the syphilitics, you have another group
who do run the banking system, their names are generally never mentioned much in the papers at all, because they're not open to the public. They're not really public figures, and they have their own particular agenda. But you've got to go back to ancient times to the present, and this particular society has always said, and Albert Pike said this in his own book, Moral and Dogma, for the Masons, the Bible of Freemasonry at the time. He said, those who will not use their own intellect to think for themselves are therefore meat on the table and beasts of burden by choice and consent. Now that really was taught to all the elite, generation to generation. That's the simple explanation they claim as to why you're all down there and they're up there, you see. You're inferior species, you are slaves, and you never complain. If you complain, it's always petitions and please, please, please to a bunch of wolves, and you get nothing done in return for it. It doesn't work, obviously. So they know they're getting to a step where, you understand, democracy, even this farce, I call it a farce, there's never been democracy, but the farce of democracy is to be eliminated altogether eventually in the planned society, where you have your own communitarian areas like they have in Britain. They've got regions set up in the States as well. They take power away from your local education authorities, they give it to the state, or even between 3 states. So it gets further and further away. The ability for the ordinary person to go and complain about anything to a politician or a representative or an official goes further and further away, and that trains you that it is remote. It is remote until eventually you don't even think about complaining to them. It's out of the question. You take it for granted. You're now simply ruled by experts and scientists, and that's how they've already trained the youngsters. Youngsters today are already trained in this. They're getting that at school, and it's a better way, they claim, and they can do away eventually with elections altogether. Technocracy is a technique now we've watched in Europe. They place their own boys from the Central Bank of Europe right into countries as the prime ministers, no election. That's to happen elsewhere too, and in the States as well. I think in the U.S., though, they'll have a lot more trouble. They do expect resistance. Really, what you expect in the States is just simple, not even rebellion, be on a personal level when people start losing their homes en masse, that type of thing. Or they've been told there'll be no more private property under Agenda 21, and they simply burn your house down with you in it, or you evacuate it. That's really what's happening. So in the U.S., there will be ragtag, sporadic, uncoordinated, non-disciplined rebellion on small levels. But look what they're ready for. Look at the ammunition they ordered in for the Homeland Security for close-quarter battle. You don't use pistol dum-dum bullets, hollow points, for overseas. You can't use them overseas against other armies. You can only use them on your own population. But they've got 750 million rounds ordered. What do you think that's for? What do the people out there think that is for? It's not for target practice. It's too expensive for target practice. You use the ordinary rounds for that. It's simply for it to be used on the public. So the elites are taking no chances whatsoever that anything possibly could go wrong. But it also is very ominous because you're looking at a war situation where those who will represent government, just like the henchmen in the Soviet Union, will always make sure that, and they select the guys, they pre-select the guys out of the armies, you know. Every soldier's given psychological tests on the way. And they know the ones and how many of them they can count on to be the new Soviet army in America.
That's right. And the ones that are good, they send them to fight the insurgents that are actually financed by the bankers. And it's a full spectrum dominance, false system where they just need an excuse to be in a country, so they fund both sides to create the fake war. And then the ones that like to be psychopaths and dominate and control everybody, they bring them back here and put them in command.
To do, and they've been doing that for years now. Every person who applies to be a police officer has a psychological evaluation. They don't want an IQ over 95 or 98, but they want the brute force type ones, the ones who get off on slaughter and power and watching civilians quiver in front of them. That's the type they've been employing very deliberately. Remember, nothing is happenstance.
Okay, well, let me say this to you, because I know they're scientific, they study every facet through the military-industrial complex. But the globalists are not invincible. I mean, give me your take on that.
It depends how you see it. Understand, most of what's happening today is through almost perfect conditioning, generation by generation, through the school system. Is taken over by entertainment and television, and people are pretty well perfectly conditioned. They really will adapt to almost anything. They know this by the studies they've done already. The general public will adapt to almost every situation that you...
Let me stop you right there. I was on an airplane and even wrote his name down and told Ted Anderson about it, and he looked at it on his iPhone, and then later I lost the guy's name, but he was one of the managing director presidents of one of the biggest banks in New York, and I was being flown up there to be on The View. So I was in first class with him. He'd come to Austin to visit his dad that was a retired general. And he knew who I was, I later learned in the talk. And he said, look, people will muddle through anything. Whatever we do, they'll just adapt to it. And we basically use that against them. And I told him, no, humanity will prevail. It was kind of like Winston talking to O'Brien. But, Alan, I'm going to be honest with you. There's only one area with you that I don't totally agree with you. And that's that they've got their act completely together. They have general programs. They've studied things. They're worried about the wild card individual. You've talked about that. But I've also heard you talk about, you know, the elite will give us leaders and the elite will do all this. Well, I know I'm for real. I know that I came out of nowhere by the, you know, going to Access TV and stuff like that. I know you're for real and not controlled. And I know so many other people in the system itself, not just independents like us, that don't like what's happening. And I do see a bigger awakening, and I do see victories. You know, people can't believe I snuck into Bohemian Grove. They think it must have been fake. People can't believe that, you know, other stuff, like they think my David Gergen is fake. Well, no, they never just went and stood outside the main entrance to Madison Square Garden during the RNC in 2004, knowing bigwigs would come in to confront them. I mean, that's not rocket science to know, okay, there's one of the back entrances where all the VIPs are coming in. Let's sit here and eat hot dogs, you know, at this stand for an hour and see, and at the time smoke cigarettes, see who comes in here. Hey, that's David Gergen. Let's get him. People who sit there on the bench cannot imagine men of action. So all I'm saying is people have to believe they can take action, because I know laying down's not going to do anything. I mean, what do you say to that?
Well, they know consistently that 80-odd% of the public will do nothing. And again, they've got all the statistics there. Other countries that measured it. They did it with the Soviet Union. Dzerzhinsky said at the time, he says you can beat them, you can starve them. He says, will they turn around and fight? He says, no. He says they'll eat each other. Now, that wasn't the first time in history that's happened with overwhelming force. But the public here haven't seen that. You can read about the brutality on the occasional individual. We see them tasering folk when they're down, unconscious, that kind of stuff. We see them kicking, punching them. But again, we always take it as to be the isolated incident, you see. It hasn't happened to most people yet. And because of that, they still think it's been exaggerated when these cases come on television or the internet or whatever. It's not happened to them. They'll actually do all they can to try and keep normalcy, even though you're going through an abnormal situation.
And to keep the illusion of law and order while they break the law. Absolutely.
At the top, let's be honest about it, they break the law all the time at the top. And in so many ways. I mean, if the American people truly were American people, remember, the American person of today is not the American person of the 1950s or 40s. They wouldn't have put up with what's happening today.
Well, that's the hormones. I mean, that's the hormones. As you know, people eat, compared to the 50s diet, a lot healthier now, and they're a lot more obese. That's on record. They're just killing us with the hormones. And they love it. It's fun.
Yeah. And but also it's to do with a massive education. If you were ever to try and truly alter the main thing, I mean, Lenin said the same thing, Stalin said it too, you must pay your police, your military, and your teachers the best amounts of money and take care of them, because the teachers especially train the next generation, they indoctrinate the next generation in the agenda. It's not the same agenda, it's updated just like a computer gets updated.
And by the way, I saw this article where a 6-year-old girl, we'll talk about when we get back briefly, They don't let the parents discipline their children. Then the kids get out of control. Then they handcuff you, taser you, put you in a mental institution. It's like only the warrior ants can engage in discipline. It's ending parenthood. We'll be right back. Alan, I was mentioning this KENS San Antonio article, and then I've got another one here. This is out of 13 WMAZ. Police handcuff 6-year-old girl for misbehaving, and they said, you're not allowed to spank your kids, but we're going to taser them or handcuff them, and they're charging her with resisting, and now want to put her in the juvenile hall, where she'll probably get gang raped and learn how to have diseases. What is this all about? We're about to go to break, but tell us briefly.
Again, it's a Sovietization. They used these techniques in the Soviet system, and they're training the public here to get used to it as well. Pretty well everything is happening is Sovietization. The regionalism, the free trade agreement all came out of the Council on Foreign Relations. The Council on Foreign Relations is one of the main spearheads that control all of this in the U.S. and across the world too. They run the EU Parliament. And they boast on their own website in Britain that it was their members that brought in the personal income tax and the property tax in the States and in Britain. I mean, these guys want to bring in their planned society, which they rule over totally, with peasants going back to renting. And, of course, to get the cash for renting, you've got to be very politically correct. Look at interviews. I get lots of folk telling me about interviews now. It's all PC stuff. What do you think of this? What do you think of that? It's all the latest upgrade in PC. And if you get that job, then you can pay your rent.
It's all about trendy. You don't have thoughts. You're successful because you do whatever they're told.
Yeah. And people will adapt into what is politically correct.
Stay there. I want to bring up to you how HBO's pushing pedophilia now. Why are the elite pushing that? Alan Watt's our guest. I'm Alex Jones of Infowars.com. Alan Watt of CuttingTheMatrix.com is our guest. Spot-on research into the globalist hierarchy. We debate just how insurmountable dislodging ourselves from their grasp is. But what about just assailing the normal values, having the TSA grope, the TSA every day, and new pedophile scandals? HBO, I don't know if you've seen this, is now promoting children doing things on TV I can't even say on radio. And then you're bad if you're not into it. The media makes fun of, quote, conservatives. I'm not even what you call a conservative. I'm not a sicko that wants to hurt innocents. And then you've got all these comedians doing, talking about how great abortion is and how killing babies is great. They say it's fun. It's like before it's like it's a right. Now it's like we like killing babies. So we're really seeing, I guess they're turning the public into themselves. I mean, what's going on here?
Well, remember, too, the whole manifesto, and there's 2 or 3 manifestos for the lower, middle, and high. The top manifesto talked about what they've pretty well accomplished for the majority of the public, and that is the end of the family unit. I've lost count of there's so many youngsters phoning me, and they've never known a dad, most of them, a whole generation. And so that was part of it, because only the parents, and generally the male, would stand up for protecting his wife and his children. So that had to be abolished. Once you destroy the family unit, the male, if he's still a male, has nothing much to fight for except himself, you see. And he's far more ferocious when he's fighting for the rights of his wife and children. So you'd never allow the groping and all this kind of stuff to go on in the first place. Plus, again, the culture industry is a big part of this in the movies. When you watch movie after movie and it's sex, you're being, again, upgraded, just like a program, with the latest download into the new normal. The new normal, well, that's acceptable. That's now acceptable. That's
like what girls watch in all this hardcore porn. The women, studies show, don't even really like it, but then the women start doing it because, well, that's what you're supposed to do.
Yes, and you've now got women dressing up like they're show children. They go to these parades, these shows that they go to for top beautiful child sort of thing. That's dressed like a little whore, and the mother's dressed exactly the same with them, like an older whore. I mean, this is the new normal.
That's the new feminism, is turning women into abject whores.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And once you've done that, you see, you've destroyed the family unit. There's no male input into anything. The males kind of watch all this stuff and maybe Google it too because they're all degenerate as well. But we all become degenerate through our indoctrination, mainly through comedies and television. The most perverse stuff will start with in a comedy where you don't want to turn it off. You're kind of used to the characters, and it comes near the middle of the story or the movie, and then you're followed to see the end. The same with thrillers.
And again, because they know that when they destroy your normal, basic human programming, they override it so you can't recognize threats to society. So you're just basically being wrecked psychologically. This is an attack.
Yes.
Yeah.
And at the United Nations, remember too, which is a big pusher of all of this stuff. I mean, that's the prime function, is to destroy all this stuff and bring in a Sovietized type system. The Sovietized system, remember, is communitarianism, where it's all run by councils right down to your local level. But anyway, getting back to pedophilia and so on, it's being taught gradually, and this is a very old thing that they try to push even in the Middle Ages of some countries, that withholding your body from a person who wants the use of it is antisocial. And they're teaching this gradually. They've been teaching it for years now.
And that's so they can forcibly inoculate you, which is now beginning without parental consent. And then the state says, not only is it your right, now we're going to make you, the state wants to, they're getting you used to being in your space.
Yes, and they're also doing away, you see, gradually, because they're very clever with the use of words and terminology. I mean, Bush used the Patriot Act, which is the most unpatriotic act you could possibly have passed. It's the opposite.
Let's talk about word games when we come back and then go to phone calls. Alan Watts, our guest. Yeah, I mean, look at the TSA. They take your little child away from you. They're crying. A big fat man comes over, and the groping starts. But it's authority doing it. They're training you to have your children taken. We'll be right back. All right, we're going to your phone calls here in a moment. Christopher first, who's been patient, and others. But, Alan, I wanted to talk to you about the acceleration of the cashless society. We always said it was coming. Even if you use cash, they're going to thumbprint or face scan you. The IRS, same thing Russia's doing. If they say you haven't paid taxes, no judge or jury, no proof, plus it's even paid to the private Federal Reserve, so it's illegitimate and fraud, then you can't leave the country. They're saying you won't be able to have a job. You'll just be homeless. All of this is coming into place. Open war against farmers, ranchers. We've got some big breaking news on the TSA. It's now been announced they've got undercover officers on the streets. A congresswoman has admitted this, and on buses, even here in Texas, in Houston. That's going up on Infowars.com the next 30 minutes. All of this is just, I mean, it's leaping forward. And then the word games they play of how they're doing this all for our own good. Alan Watt.
Yeah, it's Orwellian, isn't it? Everything that they do is Orwellian. It means the opposite of whatever they tell you it's for. And it's going to escalate and escalate, because they do know, they expect kickback from all the laws that they're pushing through. And they run these programs through the RAND Corporation to even give estimates on sporadic violence here and there, kickback from the public, who are very unhappy with what's happening. And so they're making sure, like all governments have done in the past, by the way, that they've got so many spies out there that they can't miss anything. They can't rely totally on electronics. They've got to also listen to conversations in bars, in restaurants, in buses, wherever people are chatting. That's what they're out for, to take the pulse of the public, to see if they're dumbed down talking about the latest movie, or they're talking about, you know, this is pretty awful what's happening with taxes and so on, or America's becoming a scary place. That's what they're out there to do. Britain did it even the early 1900s when they sent Lawrence to Arabia. Oh, BBC a few years ago, if they hear you just say you don't like open borders, they arrest you, even though there's no law. They arrest you just to create a total fear. And I told people, the TSA is the new Gestapo, minimum wage thug, which Stalin, Hitler, they all create their own little goon force and then expand it. And they're now everywhere. And again, they're caught committing crimes everywhere. They're just acclimating us to that. And now they're admitting on Houston TV, we got the report going up, that yes, a congresswoman is so proud of it. They're there spying on everyone. So now spying, and people are like, man, it's good. And then I randomly go to churches now to check them out. And even little country churches are like, worship your government. I mean, it's just total Soviet Union. Yeah, because they all belong to the World Council of Churches, and Rockefeller started that up for that very purpose long ago. So you're living in a planned society. We're going generation through a plan. And they'll update the plan once, fine-tune it here and there when they want it to be more effective. But the reason they publish these articles themselves is to instill into everyone, to be like the Soviets were too. You walk along the street, you look at the sidewalk, don't look up, don't look at anybody in the eyes, don't make conversation. You're being trained, literally, not to express your thoughts.
And you don't care if they kill you with GMO and cancer viruses and fluoride and radiation, as long as everybody leaves you alone and you're so it's all these cowards who are just afraid of being looked at. So they wear the proper outfit to be trendy, whatever that is in their area, and then that's just it. And we better shut up. You know, the government's corrupt. Alex is still a kook and crazy, and so's Alan Watt, but it's all real, so we just better shut up.
Yeah, it's all training the public. And again, it's great too with their iPhones. They can stare at that instead of staring at people. And simply, you live in your own little world out amongst the general public. That's the whole training exercise of it.
How do we shock people out of the trance? Because I do see a lot of people coming out of the trance. It is a minority, but it's explosive compared to what it used to be.
Mm-hmm. And they have to get ready to start expressing themselves. You understand, any change at all, and I'm talking about even peaceful change, will still take sacrifice of many individuals who are persecuted and tortured or killed, until enough of them are tortured and killed, until even the general public say, you know, this can't go on. And that's what's happened in the past when tyrannies have risen up to this height. So it's not a matter of looking for a big, massive group to form. Generally, they fall back into the con game of politics. They're infiltrated, and then it goes round in circles. Both parties, and Carl Quigley said that since the late 1800s, at the top levels have belonged to the same organization, and across the world. So it's nothing new. So you understand, it's something else has to happen here. Everything, of course, is within the public's ability, but the public are never unified on anything. And they could stop going to work tomorrow. They could stop driving their cars. They could stop paying their taxes. They could stop doing 100 things, but they won't be unified in doing it. And again, the elites make sure that a good percentage are terrified of being singled out and made an example of. And that's the common thing. They make an example of you. Or else, if they are married or they have a partner or whatever, the partner will nag them. Oh, don't stick your head up. Don't bring the heat on our house, and so on. So it's fear that keeps people down, and fear allows.
And it's like, give the kids the cancer shots because they might get in our face about it. So go ahead and brain damage our kid. It's just.
Oh yeah, I mean, there's no doubt about it. I mean, just going over the statistics, and you can get them anywhere pretty well, the graphs for autism and the introduction in the 50s of all inoculations, and they're both side by side in the same graph that skyrockets.
Well, pediatric cancer on average is up 10,000%, yep. And I haven't done the graph on if roughly 30-something years ago, autism was 1 in 25,340 something. And then now, depending on the actuary, it's 1 in 65 or 1 in 54. It varies right in that area. Folks can pull up the numbers on that. I mean, how many 1,000-point increase is that? Or diabetes, I know, is like 3,000% for type 2? Yeah.
And if you tack into that, it's about 1 in 4, 1 in 5 who's got a form of autism. Because really, attention deficit, hyperactivity, all these things are simply degrees of the same thing. Real autism, of course, is when it's really pronounced, and they can't look you in the face, and they can't pay attention to you at all. But you've got all these other categories as well. Now, interestingly enough, too, the World Health Organization announced about 3-4 months ago from their own website that they're getting ready for these third-world countries. They're so-called liberating and bringing into the new system to bring them up with a standard of living. Well, the first ones in are the World Health Organization, and it said they're going to have to do multi-vaccinations on everyone. And then it said they'll have to get ready for the sudden, tremendous increase in cancers. This is from the United Nations website. They know what they're doing. This is deliberate. So, you understand, it's already happened to us.
Oh, yeah, no, I saw a big American Medical Association report where they said, we need to start giving children painkillers and tell them to go lie down and get in bed for a day when we give them the shots, because it's freaking mothers out to give them the shot, and they throw up, get sick, convulse, and they're just like, it's normal. There's special things in this. And all the doctors who've gone along with it, they're not consciously aiding and abetting, but they have to, like, fully commit to it because they know it's crazy deep down. I mean, it's just they're getting everybody ready. It's just like it's time to die. It's time to have fun.
You know, increased death and early death now becomes normal. They normalize everything that they bring into the system, and you know, right now it's not like having 5 people on your street dying all at once. But eventually it'll get to that step, and even then people will say what's going on, and they'll want to believe the doctor's excuses, and it's just one of them things, and etc. People always take the easy way for their own mental, what they think is their mental health. I won't look at the bad stuff. I prefer to listen.
Yeah, that's delusion over reality. Yeah. Oh, it's too scary. They're doing this to my kid. I'll just do it and hope everything's all right. And their kid.
Yeah. And the doctor will give you the scientific explanation, of course, which is no explanation at all. It's just a cover. But you'll want to believe it.
No. Doctors will still lie and say there's not mercury. And I've gotten my listeners to go, give me the insert. And they go, here's the thimerosal. The doctor's like, oh, you got me. Because the mid-level folks get off on lying. It's like a power to deceive somebody. They enjoy it.
Yep.
Yes.
And that's what they do. And actually, you understand, there's a psychology behind all this, even with the elites, how it affects them. Because as the public go along and adapt to all this stuff, they adapt to massive autism, diabetes, all the cancers, juvenile arthritis.
And they always create a gimmick. We'll have a race for breast cancer, not to find a cure, not to find out why it's up by several thousand%. And they'll make it fun, like the kids are all getting cancer, but they get a cancer Barbie. Put it back up. Oh.
Yeah. And that becomes cute. They'll have the Oprah show, I'm sure, you know, and all the rest of them. And because that's how they're all conditioned now, through the big television talk shows like Oprah.
Because 50 years ago, they would put medical students on aircraft or trains to fly in hundreds a day to come see a child with cancer. Mm-hmm. But now we've been given the gift, and people are like, what's wrong with the cancer Barbie for kids with cancer? No, I'm saying, let's find out why they're all getting cancer. Oh, I happen to know the people running things are murdering our children. And people are like, well, that's just too extreme. Yeah, I know. Reality is extreme.
Yes, and they've built these massive new hospitals in the States and in Canada, literally big factory blocks, huge things, and to treat cancers and the dying. And of course, you offered euthanasia.
Well, that's all. We've got our new economy now. Prisons, cancer wards, brain damage, diabetes, the fruits of New World Order. NAFTA, GATT, no jobs, giant crime waves, huge prisons, trudgeons, tasers, taser bracelets, children wearing tasers in school, death, murder, stinking war, millions of dead Iraqis, trendy. It's wonderful, Alan.
Yeah, that's what they've done, and then again, they turned so much of what was government's job, you know, one time, over to private sectors, including in the health industries in Britain and elsewhere, and now for profit, of course. And so then the next debate comes in. Oh, it's costing too much to treat these people.
Alan, stay there. We've got to keep you even longer now. I promise. I'll get to Christopher, who's been holding for quite a spell. Skywalker, Judy, Jessica, who's been holding the longest? Christopher, Skywalker, then Jessica, Richard, Judy. We're going to get to all of you. Alan Watt on with us now. And it sounds really horrible, but aren't you glad you know now? Aren't you glad? And then later I've got a special question for Alan Watt. All right, this segment, a little bit of the next, I'll jam in 5 of your calls for Alan Watt. Then I want to get into Ted Nugent in this video that the establishment globalists are freaking out about, where he talks about Obama being a criminal, which he is a criminal. But Mitt Romney's going to save us. And this is part of the mind game people play. So I'm going to talk about that coming up. Christopher in Missouri, you're on the air with Alan Watt. Go ahead. Go. Christopher, going once, going twice, gone. Okay, Christopher. Let's go ahead and go to Skywalker in California. You're on the air.
Yeah, hi. I'm just talk about the situation that happened on Thursday. I live in Modesto, California. I live like 5 blocks away from where the sheriff deputy got killed on the eviction notice. I heard rumors that day when it was happening on Facebook feed that it was an army vet that actually did it, and they couldn't find he like barricaded himself in the building, and when they burnt it up, they found a body that was just bones. I don't know if it's a girl or female. So I'm thinking it was
I saw that report, and as they go, to take farms, ranches, and I got the cops reportedly just burned it down. The new thing is they're going to burn you out. But people aren't going to just be waiting to be burned out in the future. There's a lot of evidence they murdered this guy up in Georgia, burned his house down with him in it. And we got there and the police said, you're not allowed to film the city hall. You're not allowed to enter. This is not America, is basically what they told us. I played that yesterday. Alan Watt, we're going to see more and more of this, aren't we?
Definitely, again, go back to the old videos. There's plenty up there on the nets to do with the Soviet system in the Ukraine and in Russia, where they sent the armies after farmers, and not all of them caved in. Lots of them went down with their houses, and you see them firing back at the troops and so on, as they tried to take off the only little bit of property they had and their livelihood away from them. This is obviously, again, it's a global agenda. It's not happening just in one country. Whatever happens in America is happening across the world at the same time, because they're standardizing the culture of the world and the system of the world for global government, you see.
Well said. Anything else, Skywalker?
One more thing. It's surprising just to see it in my neighborhood happening in front of my eyes. But yesterday, the two neighboring towns, 2 people were killed by 2 different officers on 2 different incidents. One was just a pulled over charge. No, actually, one was a report for a family dispute, but it turned into the officer had to shoot him, and they ended up dying. And the other one,
what's going to happen is the public's degenerating, the police are degenerating and stressed out, and there's 5 million guns or more being sold a month, and the police are going to start getting scared, and they're going to start killing people, and so the public's going to start just shooting when they see police, which is a bad idea. And that's what they want. The globalists want a civil war. Thank you, Skywalker. Do you agree with my statement on that? That the globalists don't care if the military and police get chewed up. They want to have a civil war in North America.
I'd say so. In order to justify with overwhelming force in a pre-planned agenda of how they tackle it all, to buckle what's left really down into abeyance. That's
and SPP says that, as you know. The North American Union documents we got, they admit that.
Mm-hmm. And also, too, the police are not the same police. They've been trained to be paranoid of the public for years now, but they've also been given permission. It's a tacit admission and permission to simply taser the people to death or shoot them, kill them. The inquiries go nowhere. The inquiry is eventually they'll just do away with inquiries altogether. That's where it's going.
Well said, Alan. Let's now go to Jessica in Texas. Jessica, you're on the air. Welcome.
Hi, Alex. I'm wondering what you think is the realistic level of complicity by the media, politicians, and Hollywood in bringing in the New World Order. Do you think that they're aware of what they're helping to create, or are they just...
I just talked to a national media figure today who was actually brought into the meeting and given the speech I was given years ago that sell out, you'll get all this power. And, of course, he's all freaked out about it. But the point is that low-level media just regurgitates the national media. At a local TV station, you get national packages and then just read your voice so it looks like it's local, or you stand there and read it. So it's talking points. Most people are just thinking about how they want to go home and get drunk, or go home and see their girlfriend, or go to the park and, you know, play Frisbee golf. So it's a selfishness. I'd say, what, 95% of people that work for the system don't know it, Alan?
A lot of them, well, actually, a lot of them do know it as well. She made a good point about Hollywood. Hollywood is an essential arm. It's the essential arm for the culture industry.
Tell you what, stay there, and I want her to stay there too. Jessica, we're going to come back and have a follow-up and let Alan comment on that. Riveting information. I'm talking about locals, 95%. Oh, yeah. If you get into manager levels of Hollywood, national TV and stuff, these people are smart enough to know what's going on and to follow orders, and they get off on it. So, yeah, I agree with that statement. So just enjoy, then. We'll be right back. Stay with us. I was just looking at Infowars.com, and one of the top stories there in the tiles, Jon Stewart exposes the fraud of the Federal Reserve. Jon Stewart's brother is the head of the New York Stock Exchange. Jon Stewart's a fake stage name. And you talk about victory. The fact that 15 years ago, I would have national media call me and say, you are insane, the Federal Reserve is not private, and it's racist to say it is. And I'm racist. You know, they would inject that. Don't like government health care? You're racist. They just throw that in there. Doesn't make any sense. It's a non sequitur. They do it. And now, all these years later, over 90% in major polls know the Federal Reserve is private. So now Jon Stewart can expose it to his idiot viewers. Of course, they'll just change the name. I predict when the charter comes up next year, in 2013, that they're going to change the name of it. They're going to reincorporate, same owners, new name. At least they're going to try it. Now, going back to Alan Watt and Jessica in Texas, Alan, you were cut off by the break getting into Hollywood. And how many people in the media system know what they're doing? Go ahead.
Well, I put a list up of the CFR members from their own website in the U.S., and anybody who's any kind of reporter at all across the whole country and the world is a member of the Council on Foreign Relations. You can't join it. You have to be asked to join after you've been vetted for your opinions on things. Will you go along with this agenda? Yep, that's it. And getting back to Hollywood, though, Hollywood was almost like an invasion into the U.S. People don't even know how it started from the European guilds that came over, especially when Hitler was coming in. And they started pushing their communist ideals through movies right away. Again, destruction of the family unit, affairs. Everybody had affairs in the movies. Made it exciting. And the same techniques were used until, of course, they had the anti-American hearings, of course, and even the top owners of some of these big television companies, big movie companies, had to admit they had employed lots of writers, and they blamed the writers for bringing all this communistic stuff in, all the agendas. And then they cooled it down for years and gave you nothing but westerns after that. You remember that? Lots and lots and lots of westerns with not too much political mention at all in the dialogue. But then they went back again.
Yeah, just pro-war, so they shifted.
Yep.
And again, folks in Hollywood have admitted that they saw it as revolutionaries to destroy Christianity and destroy the family ethic, to render us down to be weak, servile minions.
That's right. And also Sarah Sarandon came on television at one of the big meetings, big award things for actors and producers. She was on live television along with Michael Moore, of course. And she said, "We are the culture creators." So, see, that's how they refer to themselves in the industry. They don't follow culture. They create the next part of culture. They update you see. And that's well known amongst all the Hollywood people, is what they're actually doing. They are the prime people to give us our thoughts, our emotions about things. Most folk think emotionally. They don't think through logic. And you remember the scenes, etc., with emotion attached to it. And, of course, they don't understand that this is all to affect you.
And by the way, I have, at the highest levels, take Jesse Ventura's TV show, when we actually got shows on about FEMA camps and the takeover plans, Homeland Security threatened people. Once you're part of something, and as a journalist you promise not to reveal things, I can't go into all of it, but it was stuff being broken into, threats, not just congressmen calling, and they took that show off the air. And then now, basically, I'm not even going to get into it. People are like, where's the third season? Well, the point is that it's real. And I just talked to another national media figure earlier who said, oh, my God, it's all real. And I know all the behind-the-scenes stuff. And, of course, he's like, in confidence, I'm going to tell you this now because this was in confidence. And it's so real. It's so real. It's so real. People say, well, if you were in media meetings over the years, and people offered you jobs and admitted the New World Order was real, why don't you expose them? Because they say, as a journalist or in business, we're going to offer you this, but this is off record. If I ever break an oath, then there's no point in people ever giving me information. Now, if it was of a criminal act, like hurting children or something, I would break it, or a bank robbery. But and it's also the way they do it. I'm just telling them that when I'm talking to fade the caller down because there's a buzz on the line. The point is that when you're sitting there talking to people, and it's like, well, yeah, there's got to be a global government to help people, and we've got to get rid of this system to bring it in, and we're going to help others, and it needs to be managed, and yeah, it's real, but the public doesn't want freedom. The fact that you're to the point you've gotten means you're one of us. You're successful. Join the team. It's almost like They Live when they get into the underground complex and they see the guy they thought was just a bum but was really a spy working with the off-worlders, and he's like, hey guys, good to know you made it. Got to get yourself some fancier duds. Now that you've joined the team, let's go on in. And he's like, incredible technology, isn't it, boys? It's good to be on the winning team, isn't it? You know you want it. You know you wanted to join the team, boy. I'm sorry, go ahead, Alan.
Well, that's exactly how it is. And so self-interest and ego is pampered too. And most people take the baits and go with it. Think, okay, I don't belong to the masses anymore. I belong to a better group, and that's how they literally see it and talk about it amongst themselves. So, but Hollywood itself is the culture in this industry, which gives you the updates on the culture, and the people follow it because monkey see, monkey do. That's what they said, 60 years ago in Hollywood.
Have you had them come to you and say, Alan, you're really smart. You really know what's going on. Join us, because that's the speech everybody gets.
Oh, I've been approached by the top ones who've asked me to come to the roundtable societies for global citizenship committees.
I have too. I've been invited to the UN, everything, yeah.
Yeah, and of course I won't take the bait because, and I know too, if I did, I'd be sitting on easy.
No, you get there and there's like a gorgeous woman who's going to be with you for the weekend and all these business opportunities. It'd be like, people are like, oh, that sounds great, sell out, sell out. Yes, no, it is a heartless, soulless system. I will not.
Yeah, and then they even offer to you, they'll do all you don't have to write your own books, ghostwriters will just churn out books for you, one after another, and so because you're useful, once you're a public figure, you see they can use you.
No, they told me you'll be a big national talk show host who's young, like Limbaugh, you'll be on TV. I was described Glenn Beck's job before he even had a political show. 3 separate times by different groups. Yep. I mean, they were looking for the new Glenn Beck.
Well, yeah, and it's in the Council on Foreign Relations' own reports. I have them here, where a few years ago, I kept them all, where they said that they'd had to take on board more celebrity figures in the culture, actors, even talk show hosts, and bring them on board because the public will follow them like sheep, you see. And they did. They recruited quite a few from Hollywood now to lead their fans along this new way of thinking of globalism, internationalism, and of course, the people are already going along with them. Whatever they say, they'll start parting it too.
And notice they take people like Charlie Rose, and he's got ABC shows, he's got PBS shows, and he's one of the few journalists allowed into Bilderberg. Let's go back to Jessica. Jessica, does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. And I'd also just like to say that I notice how you often make reference to historical events, and I think that's really important in giving people context for what's going on now, and I was hoping that you would consider having a contest for writers in addition to your contest for reporters so that people like me have a platform to submit the things that we write about and the research that we do.
Well, number one, anybody can submit stuff to writers@infowars.com, and from your blog or whatever, and we'll post it with a link, at the top to your blog, if we can read over it and find that we think it's accurate information. So you can write for Infowars.com. I mean, I don't do what other people do, is go through all the other sites and try to take people's contributors. Sometimes sites that want us to post their stuff later say don't post it. Then I watch their Alexa rating drop, because they think that, being on our site actually takes traffic when it actually gives them traffic. But all we care about is getting the info out. So if you'd like to write stories for us, go ahead. But a on-staff writer job would be good. We just have the limited capital in the final equation. If I can pay my people a living wage and try to give them bonuses so they can be comfortable in their work, I can't hire that many more people, but we're working on it. Thank you so much. Let's jam in some other calls now quickly. Judy in Florida, you're on the air. Go ahead.
Hey, this is a dream phone call for me. I've actually spoken with both of you gentlemen, and it's an honor to speak with you now. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Good. What I've been thinking while I've been listening to you, and just what I consider a lot, is that we're in a time right now where I think there's going to probably be probably fairly soon some type of false flag, and I hope I'm wrong, but it seems as though there's two paths. It's either the acceleration is occurring because, as I've heard Alan say, the globalists are right on course, or they could be just as fearful as they're trying to make us. And I was wondering what your thoughts are, both of you, on whether or not, if there was a day when everyone, including those with means, those in Hollywood that have consciences, people, I mean, there's organizations that I work with.
Sure, a day that we do what?
In order to internationally show a not just a disdain, but to, go to government places and say, we want individuals removed, we want this to happen now, and to show this peaceful force of people that will be...
Sure, here's the deal. Like shark teeth, and I appreciate your call, another row of teeth will roll up. You've got to expose the entire false system, or they'll just replace it with new puppets. You've got to have a full awakening, and Brzezinski did say a few years ago that humanity's waking up politically for the first time in history to the man behind the throne. And in that is the victory, in realizing you're in a manipulated scientific dictatorship. In that, I'm not saying it's a bad idea just to go have a day, but we need like not an anti-corporate day or an anti-whatever day, an anti-scientific dictatorship day. Alan?
You do, but you also have to also write about and get into how many non-governmental organizations are attached to every government across the world. The same ones, by the way, by the same foundations, who help make policy for governments to run. Remember, divide and conquer was the initial way of the communist system, and under different names, the same system, same guys, same people, pushing the same stuff. And they've got so much divisiveness in society now. Rights of the child means no rights of the parents. They've got men and women as a couple almost eliminated. And of course, they really want...
Yeah, you want to defeat the New World Order, get families back, get humanity back. That's how you defeat the New World Order.
Literally wipe out, I mean, get rid of, let's expel them all these governmental organizations that now are appointees to governments across the world are the same ones. And the ones that cause the divisiveness, etc., and who know the agenda and know their part in it, and who get legislation on the books, you don't elect them in, and therefore they shouldn't be there at all.
You're right. The unelected boards, the NGOs, the shadow government, kick it out. Identify the shadow government, the parasited legitimate system, kick it out. Get rid of the Federal Reserve, get rid of it all. Great points. Richard in Canada. Richard, you're on the air. Go ahead.
Hi, guys. I just wanted to say, growing up in this little town I live in Canada, there were 4 main pedophiles. One was a cop, not to put down police officers because, bad apple. One was a priest. One was a teacher. And the 4th one was a high-ranking member of the Mormon Church. And the other thing I want to point out is now I'm 40 years old, and we tend to look at pedophiles as being an old man, but I'm of that generation now. I'm of that age group where look at Miley Cyrus and Billy Ray and the half-naked pictures of them on television and this sort of thing. And I don't know, maybe I'm not making a lot of sense, but I'm seeing the demise of our society, and the pedophilia thing seems to
Look, it's just like Rome. It's just like the Aztecs. We are a society in deep, deep decadence.
We understand, too.
And it seems like it's organized.
Sure. Go ahead, Alan.
Here's the kicker for this one. They want to do away with the name pedophilia altogether. The World Health Organization, the United Nations has said this. And the International Department of Censors that their meetings every year for your
NAMBLA is an NGO, exactly. They love NAMBLA. They love it.
Well, they actually say that they want to do away. 2 professors said at the same time, same script actually, Canada and the States at the last censor meeting for television internationally that they had. They said that now that we've won the rights for homosexuality, we must now go into removing pedophilia from the books and introducing animal human sex.
And bestiality. That was in one of the bills they passed, that the troops can have sex with animals on base, yeah.
United Nations and professors at universities, etc., because you understand everything that they introduce this way causes an opposite reaction. that there's chaos in different new areas now. And then the government steps in with even more authority, new bureaucracies to deal with all that.
And before you know it...
There's no family at all.
Exactly. And before you know it, you're a pedophobe. You're a bad person because you don't want them grabbing your 5-year-old.
Yeah, that's right. So that's the whole thing. Government wants to run everybody's life from cradle to grave. And so the more chaos they can introduce by this legislation, the better for them. And now they've got to even... someone sent me a disc. I don't watch television, so they sent me a disc from what's showing in Britain. And they're showing you 12-year, 13-year-old girls with guys in their 50s, 60s, and how much...
And parties eating fetuses.
Yes, that too. So you're being totally degraded and degenerated until you cannot take care of yourself or your own. That's the whole purpose of this. It's a war.
And then just like in one of the old books, the Bible, is it Genesis, where they're in Sodom and Gomorrah and the guys come to the door and bang on it and say, give us your kids.
Yeah, give your and your boys. I mean, it was really the boys that we're after. You know, and of course he offered his wife to them. They didn't want the wife. They wanted.
That's right. He's like, here's my wife. And they're like, no, we want your little kids. Yeah. They want to wreck the innocence. It's always the legion vanguard of the New World Order for thousands of years is pot-bellied men coming for your children, and that's the TSA. I mean, this is a planet pedophile ruled by pedophiles with nuclear weapons.
Yes, and as I say, it strips all. They've already stripped almost all the rights of the parents away, if there's a parent at all, and then of course they're giving the rights to the child with the intention that the child can then make their own decision if they're going to have sex with this old geezer. I mean, that's really what it is, and they've actually used that already. Well, that's why they're saying they're going to inoculate kids and have abortions if the 10-year-old says they want it.
Again, and they say it's their consent. I mean. And they say they're going to start killing children up to age 3. We haven't talked about that. Alan Watt, incredible having you on with us today. I really enjoy it when the globalists try to poison us, and, well, we resist them via a free market system. Hello, my fellow info warriors. Alex Jones here, introducing you to the ProPure family of gravity-fed filters. Now, you know that the globalists are filling our water with radioactive isotopes, fluoride, lead, mercury, arsenic. And one of the few systems that can efficiently and economically remove or reduce down to non-detectable levels these poisons are gravity-fed filters. And ProPure is the top of the line. Their filters are impregnated with silver, a natural antibiotic. On top of that, they're bigger, so they filter faster. You don't have to prime these the first time you use them. It's amazing. Go to Infowars.com and click on the shopping cart link to see the entire family of these babies. Now, the fluoride they add to our water is so tiny that most filters can't cut it out. But ProPure has their system that will, again, reduce it to non-detectable levels, almost get all of it out of there. That's also available. And if you look at the different systems they offer, the ProPure Big Brush Finish is on a stand, so it's easier on a table or at your restaurant or wherever you have it to go up with a glass or a mug and fill it up. Then there's this big baby right here, the ProPure King large version. Got a lot of different options that come with it. Also, they have the ProPure Big, probably one of the best values out there. And of course, it's burnished stainless steel. And then what I use on my RV, something that's great for your hunting cabin or the back porch, is the ProPure Traveler. Small and portable, but packs a huge punch, cleans out all that garbage. They also have the glass sight spigot, so you don't have to take the top off and look in the bottom area to see how much water. You can see how fast it's filtering with this optional system. The globalists obviously are hitting us through our water. It's time to take control of our lives. It's time to not give our children and families these poisons, and these systems cut it down to non-detectable levels across the board. ProPure is the name. I only promote what I believe in. And I use ProPure in my home and my office. And I recommend that you check out the information on ProPure at Infowars.com. We already have the lowest price at Infowars.com on the ProPure gravity filter system. But when you add in the 10% off when InfoWarriors use the product code WATER at Infowars.com, nobody can top it. So again, it's a win-win-win. Stop drinking the poison water. checkmate the globalists when it comes to your health, and support Infowars.com and the work we're doing here. You know, many revolutionaries rob banks and things and kidnap people for funds. We promote in the free market the products we use that are about preparedness. That's how we fund this revolution against the New World Order in our move to restore our constitutional republic and a spirit of 1776 worldwide. Check it out at Infowars.com. Pro-Pure, top of the line, #1, most powerful and effective and economical gravity-fed water system in the world. Pro-Pure, available, discounted at Infowars.com. Don't forget product code WATER to save 10%. It's the latest generation, years in development. Pro-Pure is the name.